All right. Welcome to Forward Future Live. It is Friday, January 16th. I'm Matt Berman,
And I'm Nick Wentz.
and today we have another incredible show for you. Four really incredible guests. We have Austen Allred, founder of Gauntlet AI, Aaron Levie, welcoming him back to the show, co-founder and CEO of Box, Tudor Achim, co-founder and CEO of Harmonic. You've probably heard of him or his company lately solving Erdos math problems, and Ara Kazarian, lead economist at Ramp. But first, Nick, we should talk about a couple things. A
Biggest
lot of
stories of
news
the
this
week.
week.
It was actually hard to trim down and figure out how to prioritize some of these because there were a lot of stories this week. I want to start with this joint announcement from Apple and Google. So obviously big news, but I'm going to read this and then let's dig in. So Apple and Google have entered into a multi-year collaboration under which the next generation of Apple Foundation models will be based on Google's Gemini models and cloud technology. These models will help power future Apple Intelligence features, including a more personalized Siri coming this year. After careful evaluation, Apple determined that Google's AI technology provides the most capable foundation for Apple Foundation models and is excited about the innovation, new experiences it will unlock for Apple users. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, Nick, first, I think set your mic, your input to be your mic. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. It's like kind of an admission that Apple couldn't get their game together to actually produce a good model. I think the choice of going with Google over OpenAI is pretty surprising to me, but also maybe not surprising. Google and Apple have a long relationship. When Apple realized they weren't going to be able to make a search engine, Google started paying them billions of dollars per year to be the default search engine in Safari and other places. And so this feels like an extension of that. However, I don't know who's paying who is the question. Like, there's an argument that Apple could be paying Google. There's an argument that Google could be paying Apple, right, for the right to have the
Mm-hmm.
Gemini model powering everything. And I mean, it's a big deal. Apple seems like they're just transitioning into a consumer electronics company and maybe less so everything else.
I mean, to me, the biggest takeaway here is the massive endorsement for Google AI. You can imagine that Apple went through a rigorous process to make this decision, probably looked at all the other frontier labs, and Google is what they came away with. Uh, so that to me just is a huge badge of endorsement for them.
Yeah, I mean, and then also remember when Apple Intelligence launched, they launched partnered with OpenAI. Whenever you had kind of a world knowledge question, Siri would basically farm it out to OpenAI's models.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is what was that, 18 months ago, Google didn't really have a usable model at that time. And then fast forward 18 months, and now Google has certainly a frontier model, if not the frontier model. So it's just interesting to see how everything has changed. And I know I've been kind of championing Google for the last few weeks, but they are just everything they're doing, they are executing, and it's just so impressive.
Yeah. So is this a reshuffling of alliances? To your point, OpenAI loses some prominence in Apple's ecosystem, and I can imagine that was a big deal, and therefore a big loss for them. I think this, Alphabet, Google's kind of influence really grows here, especially as a leading AI company.
Yeah, speaking of, look at Elon's reply to this. So this
Right.
seems like an unreasonable concentration of power for Google, given that they also have Android and Chrome. And I think he might have something, a little bit of a point there. I mean, obviously he's very biased because he wants Grok everywhere. But yeah, I mean, look, Google now is like certainly Android, certainly Chrome. They are the internet. Gemini is growing in popularity, and now anybody who uses an iPhone will be using Gemini. And as AI becomes more prominent in our lives, that means Gemini is going to be more prominent in our lives. And so like I get why Elon might be feeling irked a little bit here.
Yeah, certainly. Whenever you have this amount of power concentrated between one, two companies, you're always going to see antitrust get involved. It's probably inevitable here too. We shall see.
Yeah, I mean they
Uh,
they just backed off the antitrust thing with Google. So you think they're going to
right.
go back at them?
I wouldn't be surprised, but yeah, I mean that's a whole interesting story too. You know, the fact that there was so much competition, that they were facing so much competition with Anthropic and OpenAI is really the only reason that antitrust backed off in the first place. And now we're seeing
Yeah.
that resurgence again.
Yeah.
What do you think this says about Apple's AI strategy? I mean, we've talked about this a couple times, but it seems like they're outsourcing a lot of their key AI innovation. Is that temporary? Is that a stopgap?
I hope so. It's a little embarrassing. I mean, look, you're a, multi-trillion dollar company. Billions of people in the world use your products. You have some of the best talent in the world, unlimited cash, and you like and then like you have somebody like Elon coming along and building a frontier model in 18 months. And it's like that's a cultural issue, right? That they have all the pieces of the puzzle, and I still think they're well positioned to win in AI, but they just can't seem to get out of their own way. And so,
Yeah.
is it a stopgap? Probably, but they are going to have to acquire. They can't get out of their own way, and they don't do major acquisitions. The last one was Beats headphones, which was,
Mhm.
just, a measly single digit few billion.
A few billion. Yeah, it seems like the sentiment around Apple's strategy has shifted in the last couple months, where it used to be, what are they doing? Why are they moving so slow? And it's kind of transformed into, oh, this is a strategic move. Sit back, wait till the dust settles, see who emerges as a leader, wait for the cost of compute to come down,
Yeah.
and so maybe this will end up being a good thing. But yeah, I have to imagine eventually they're producing their own LLM. I don't imagine that this will be the forever solution.
Yeah, Nick, you're totally right. That is the Apple strategy over the years. It's they're generally not the first to market with something, right? They're usually like, let's see how this plays out, and then let's do it the Apple way.
Right.
I think like Apple Vision Pro is a great example. The iPhone
Yep.
definitely wasn't the first mobile phone, certainly, and it certainly wasn't the first real like touch screen mobile phone. Uh,
Yep.
but that obviously they did something very special with the iPhone, and they did it their way, and it won everything. Uh, I don't know, maybe with AI it just doesn't work like that. If you're late to the party, you are excluded from the party.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? We'll see how this plays out.
Yeah.
One other thing. So during this news, as this news broke, Alphabet joined the 4 trillion market cap club briefly. I think they're back under it, but congrats,
Yeah,
Alphabet.
congrats to
Huge
Alphabet.
milestone.
Well deserved. Nvidia still pumping, I see. Yeah,
Uh-huh. So
I get it.
of this list, who reaches five first? I mean,
Wait, didn't
Nvidia.
Nvidia reach five already or no? Did I make that up?
I Oh yeah, that's a good point. Maybe they did briefly. We'll have to check. But anyway, it's probably Nvidia anyway.
Yeah, especially now with the acquisition of Grok and acceleration of revenue on the inference front, I think so. But let's uh let's bring on our first guest. I think it's about that time.
That sounds like a great idea. All right. So up first, this individual has helped train thousands of engineers through his last startup, Bloom Tech. And now he's going all in on advanced AI education with his latest startup, Gauntlet AI. which trains AI engineers. We're going to talk all about that and a lot more. Austen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's nice to see you.
Yeah.
So, just starting off, we're going to get into a lot of things actually during this discussion, but I want to hear more about the program, how it works, how you get in, how much does it cost, all of those juicy details.
Yeah, for sure. So the high level of Gauntlet AI is it costs nothing for the student ever, no matter what. And the flip side is we're very selective. So we select for raw intelligence, 98th percentile and above. We look for coding ability, that's 95th percentile and above. And then just a whole lot of hard work and grit.
How
But
is
if you're
the
accepted,
how is the raw intelligence measured?
there's a test called the CCAT that we put everybody through. So
Got it.
pretty straightforward test actually. Yeah. And then if you are accepted into Gauntlet, you start on the reason we call it Gauntlet is every week there's a new challenge. And if you get through that challenge, you advance to the next week. If you advance through the first 3 weeks, we invite you out to Austin. We fly you out. We put you up in housing. We cover food. We cover laundry. We cover someone to clean your room. You're going to be 80 to 100 hours a week just focused on building with AI, whether that's building, agents and AI stuff, or whether that's using AI to write your code. There's a series of assignments and challenges that you go through, and anybody who gets to the end gets a $200,000 or more job, and that's how we make our money. We charge a recruiting fee to our partner companies on the back end. And
What's the typical age of somebody going through your program?
I'd say early 30s is probably the most common. I mean, we have people in their 50s, we have a lot of people in their 20s, but it's kind of a median around early 30s.
So is that
Okay.
a career pivot then?
Yeah, I mean, generally we require, strongly prefer a few years of experience. Depending on which cohort you're in, some cohorts we'd require 3 to 5 years of experience as a software engineer. So it's more geared towards senior engineers than Bloom Tech was. But we test here and there with people straight out of school or who've been writing code for a long time but less experience. But generally speaking, it's for people who are already engineers looking to get to the next level.
What type of companies are typically hiring folks out of your program? Like being
Uh,
able to pay 200,000 a year is not for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality of it is you can, if you look at the net engineering cost, it's going down for pretty much everybody, because you can hire one really, really good person who knows how to use AI, and they can do the work of what used to be a team or even several teams in some instances. So, we have our big names like Zapier and Carvana and Automatic that makes WordPress. But there's a lot of small companies that no one's ever heard of. A lot of PE-backed folks that are trying to, rebuild SaaS products or, reinvigorate their companies with AI. So it really kind of runs the gamut.
And so,
When you
okay, you talked a little bit about the companies hiring and potentially being able to hire somebody more senior that can leverage artificial intelligence to write a lot more code a lot better. Does that mean there's going to be less software engineering jobs, or is it more companies are going to be able to do more?
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter, but there'll be short-term effects and long-term effects that bounce around all over the place. I mean, definitely we've seen, the companies that we work with come in and, if you ever have a chance to visit Gauntlet while it's in session, you should do so. We're in downtown Austin. But you just walk around and look at what people are building and how long they've been building it. And it's just software engineering is a completely new field now in a way that most people don't realize. So quite literally, what I used to expect an engineer could do in 6 months, at Gauntlet, 24, maybe 48 hours. So we're seeing companies come in and they'll hire a couple of people, and then we do corporate training of the existing team for our hiring partners. But yeah, we'll see. What used to be on the backlog for a couple of years, all of a sudden is in production. So
Yeah.
we see more of that, and if you give a founder a 10x speed up of what their engineers are able to do, generally they don't run out of stuff that they would like to build. There's plenty to be built. There's plenty of need, and I think it actually changes the way that companies are built. So one example would be some of our best companies that we work with, they've reduced their iteration cycle. So they go out to a potential customer, get a customer to commit to, if you had XYZ, then I would be a customer, immediately. And then they'll go build that over the next 72 hours and come back and say, okay, you're going to be a customer now. So it changes everything. From
That like
Yeah.
hybrid service slash like software business becomes much more tenable now that you can deliver that. Like my previous startup, when a customer came to us and said we would sign a six-figure contract with you if you had feature X, we would scramble the whole team over 2 weeks to get it done. And now it's and having to do that every time was a slog, but now it's completely different, is what you're saying.
Yeah, we had one customer that, I mean, their customer is generally government organizations, particularly the FBI. They do a lot of DNA analysis and that kind of thing. So they had a meeting with the FBI, and the FBI had a bunch of feature requests, and they had an engineer that after the meeting sat down and built their feature requests over the next 3 or 4 hours. And by the time they had dinner with the folks at the FBI that evening, all their requests had been built. Like that became a giant contract, and we've seen actually students within weeks generate multi-million-dollar contracts for the companies that they get hired by. So it's just a fundamentally different world now.
Do the
Yeah.
companies that are looking at like a software developer build something in the course of a day, are they looking at it and say like, wait, if it's so easy, why aren't we doing that? Why can't
Yeah,
we
I
do it
think
in front?
everybody. I mean, the number of companies that can do that is much, much smaller than people realize. And the amount of stuff to be built is much, much bigger than people realize. But everybody comes out. We used to joke that if you visit Gauntlet, your next 48 hours, you're not going to sleep because you have to rewire your brain around, okay, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for our competitive landscape? What does that do for our hiring? It just changes everything.
Yeah.
And the other wild part about AI is we have to completely rewrite our curriculum every cohort, because in our first cohort, which was a year ago, what was a very difficult 1 week project is now one-shottable with most models. And the progress is that rapid that, by the time students have been in Gauntlet for 2.5 months, they're like, oh, I can't even imagine using technology in the state of when I joined 2 months ago. That would be miserable.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
So it's so crazy. Yeah.
We had Sam Scalacci on the show last week, and you mentioning that folks are having to rewire their brain for this, and he said something very similar. He was saying like, I am used to a world where you accumulate knowledge and skills, and then that's usually sufficient to get you by in your career. And yes, you're updating your skills here and there, but never have we experienced the shift where we are constantly in a state of learning to stay on the bleeding edge. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, the consensus at Gauntlet is it takes about an hour a day just to stay on the bleeding edge. But if you spend that hour a day and you stay on the bleeding edge, that it's a vertical shift. So
Right.
we preach to our students like, look, yes, your job is going to be very different 6 months from now versus what it would be today if you graduate. So just ride that wave. And if you ride that wave, you'll be unstoppable.
Yeah. So this is probably an obvious question, but when it comes to AI fluency and AI education more broadly, every role needs it, right? And so
Mhm.
why start with engineers? Is it your background? Is it because the economics of the program wouldn't work otherwise because they command such a high salary? Do you have plans to expand into other types of roles and disciplines?
Yeah, we are working on expanding into other roles and disciplines. How exactly you do that is a little bit tricky. So engineering is an obvious first place to start, both because I mean we started by asking all of our hiring partners at Lambda School and Bloom Tech, like, what do you want? And everybody would say, we want people who know AI. And then we would say, what does that mean? And nobody
Mhm.
knew. So, back right after GPT-3 came out, we had to send out a research team and just talk to everybody that they could, figuring out if anything was working or if this was just another hype cycle. And at the time, the consensus was that this is, fancy autocomplete and pretty hypey, and it doesn't really work for real engineering. But you'd find those pockets of engineers who, had done nothing other than play with LLMs for the last year and a half. And, in the early days, we had to basically teach you how to build the equivalent of what you now get off the shelf with Claude and Cursor and whatever else. You had to, you know, okay, here's how we're going to index your code base, and then we're going to vectorize it and feed it to the model in this way. And like now that's all free off the shelf. But it's so for that reason, it was really obvious for us to get started in engineering, and it is, the biggest cost center at most tech companies. But I do think broadly wholesale, if you're an office worker who, sits behind a desk for a living, your job is going to be almost unrecognizable in the next 1 to 2 years if you're not going to be obsolete. So I think the entire economy needs to retrain. We're
Did
working on
you
it.
did you
Economics are
see?
a little different when you're not, you know, shelling out 250K plus per
Right.
person. And that's on that's to be clear, that's the floor, right? We
Yeah, what is
have
the average?
I don't know what the average is. I know that, on the high end, we've had people hired at 700, 950. Like, the sky's the limit. The average is probably a little bit between 200 and 300. The median is 200.
Hmm.
But once you get someone with a lot of experience or, expertise in one particular field, it's a very different market and a different ball game. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you guys are located in Austin. I want to talk about that a little bit. What's the vibe in Austin right now? Obviously, like with the potential billionaire tax, there's a lot of folks moving from not a lot, but there, a high profile people moving from California to Austin. What is it feeling like there right now?
Yeah, I think everybody in Austin is like the way I would describe it is Austin is very proud about building real lasting businesses. So trying to be a little bit anti-hype relative to, San Francisco, hype turns into its own currency in a way. Austin's trying to figure out what's real. So the way when I talk to a company in San Francisco, it would be like, yeah, we're, all the VCs are talking about us and we're burning $3 million a month and we have, a million a month in revenue and people just can't get enough of us and we're successful. And then when you talk to a company in Austin, they're like, yeah, we're doing 4 million a month in revenue. We're burning a million a month. So we're doing, 2 or 3 million a month in profit, but VCs don't care about us and we're just doing our own thing. So it's almost polar opposite. When I talk to a company in Austin, I fully expect them to be cash flow positive or very close to it, which is a plus and a minus. We haven't seen, there's obviously the Elon world that has kind of migrated to Austin. And then culturally, the Joe Rogan comedian world has migrated to Austin. But you don't notice most of that in the day to day.
How
I
long you
think
been there for?
a little over a year. So
Okay.
I'm a recent migrant. I missed the first wave, so to speak.
Why do you think that shift has happened? Why is there such a difference between the type of startup that exists between San Francisco and Austin?
I think historically it was like what is rewarded and what is incentivized. So if you're in Austin, you don't the VC dollars aren't the way that you win, and you don't raise a bunch of money and take secondary off the table and try to become a poker chip that subsidizes everything else. You have to stand on your own 2 feet, which is sometimes good. It can be it can lead to less risky companies, but also less overall hype. So it's just a cultural shift. And then Austin, it has other industries that are actually real. The oil and gas industry is material. The real estate is a massive thing. Whereas in San Francisco, it felt like it's either tech or you're somebody that serves the tech people or nothing.
Yeah.
Mm.
And there are pluses and minuses to all of that. But yeah, we love Austin. It's been great.
So,
What's your
so
favorite barbecue?
Oh, that's something that'll get you killed out
yeah,
here.
put him on the
Oh,
spot.
risky question, my bad.
La Barbecue is probably my favorite.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
mine too.
Yeah.
It's so good.
All
They just
right,
moved to Portland, little
Oh,
annex
do an
to
interesting.
Portland. Yeah,
offsite there, Nick.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, Austin, I first reached out to you. I can't remember, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And the reason I reached out to you is because you kind of published this thing on X talking about you just acquired a company. It was essentially failing and or dead, and you were going to revitalize it, infuse it with artificial intelligence, and bring it back and accelerate it. And you were going to create, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of a reality show around the entire experience. Tell us a little bit about that,
Yeah, it was
and
kind of
where
a
you're at now.
wild, it was a wild confluence of events. So, um, one of our hiring partners that had hired a lot of people from us, they were looking at what we were doing and they're like, we're hiring all of your people and then we're like throwing them at businesses and they're making the businesses successful. Like you guys might want to start playing in that field a little bit because we're getting the real value out of hiring all the Gauntlet people. And then another hiring partner, they're a PE fund that we were just talking. It actually started on Twitter. They took over a company called Marin Software, which was a giant publicly traded behemoth. And then they're an ad platform that let you manage ads across mostly Meta and Google. And over time, Meta and Google basically copied their biggest features, and the other stuff that they were doing, they turned into a black box, so you couldn't edit or change any of it, and just killed the company. So they turned the company over to us, just having fired all the customers. So zero revenue, zero people, old code base, go do what you want out of it. So we started with students, from okay, let's figure out what there is in this market that's worth going after. Let's figure out how we can use AI to, add value here. So there wasn't even an idea of exactly what we needed to build. And then we had to, go out and build it and sell it. And we had 6 weeks to do it. Not to spoil the reality show, which is being edited now and should be out in the next little bit. We got to 1.5 million in annual revenue in those 6 weeks, and so the company they're hired a bunch of people that are running it, and it's still profitable and on the other side of my office right now. So they're here.
Amazing.
Where is that show going to air?
That is the question.
Yeah,
It's being pitched to a bunch of different places right now.
amazing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the state of education a little bit more broadly. Something that comes to mind is we keep hearing this idea of lowering prices, abundance, all of these things that are the beneficiary of tech innovation. Education is expensive. It's
Mhm.
increasingly expensive. So why is the cost of training and educating people generally going up so much rather than going down with technology?
Because the crux of what happens and who enrolls in schools is where government funding flows from, and the government is incentivized to just let more and more funding flow to more and more broken schools. So that's actually being flipped on its head.
Broken in what sense?
I mean, so in higher education, it's all based on accreditation.
Right.
So even if you look at, the University of Austen, which is a new experiment, they have to enroll if you have anything that's a little bit outside of what is being done traditionally, it's a 4-year wait to get that approved by the accreditors. And until then, you can't get access to Pell Grants or student loans, and every other school does. So if you want to have an actual school, that's the main bottleneck. In K through 12, everybody gets a free public education. There are a couple states that are opening up to vouchers now. So as an example, my kids go to Alpha School here in Austin,
Oh, I've heard of
which
that.
is
Oh,
just
yeah.
phenomenal. But it's expensive. List tuition is 40,000 per year per kid. Not everybody can afford that. But now that Texas in the past couple of months launched uh, it's called Freedom something or other. It's not quite a voucher, not quite, free, but Alpha is actually extending, some of its subsidiary schools that operate on the exact same technology. So, starting next year, anybody in Texas that meets the TIFA criteria will be able to attend the same school that my kids do effectively remotely for free. So the
How does
access to the
remotely work?
best, what was that?
How does remotely work?
I mean, so the core academic portion of what my kids do is on a computer that's AI driven. So it's software that automatically adjusts to your learning level and will like, think of having like a personalized tutor. It's through apps, but there's AI that's watching and adjusting in the background all along the time. So, the kids that go to Alpha, they spend 2 hours a day on academics, and the rest of the day you can do all sorts of different stuff. But they all end up, 99.9th percentile, everything, perfect SATs. Like they learn twice as fast as public school kids. It's just way, way better. So you take that same software, you give it to everybody, and the software is actually doing the core of the instruction and the teaching, and at least the academic part.
And then, sorry, just to clarify, so the kids that are joining remotely, where are they joining from, and then what do they do with the remaining, 5 hours of their day?
From home is the answer to the first part. And then depending on which version you join, so Texas Sports Academy is sports based. So you do a couple hours of academics, then you go play sports. There's Novatio, which is, a couple hours of academics, and then you do more like remote group life stuff. There are homeschool versions where it's, you're gonna do a couple hours of academics and then play hockey or go surfing or go, I don't know, whatever you want to do. Whatever life skills you want to learn and however you want to spend your time, you can do that. So
Sounds pretty good.
yeah, it's good life. Kids are super, super lucky.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you see all of this playing out? The formal, traditional educational institutions, do we start seeing attendance drop and more of these Gauntlet AI type schools popping up? What do you imagine?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I mean, I I still think in 10 years from now, Stanford will probably be a thing and Harvard will probably be a thing. I think they're losing um, some of their capital. Like the first some of the first Gauntlet hiring partners used to in the 90s they ran a program that was very similar to Gauntlet. It was, for the internet, but they started it by just stapling, job offers to anybody who graduated from Stanford or MIT.
Right.
And now we're actually this summer running a Gauntlet specifically for uh, sophomores from CS sophomores from Stanford and MIT specifically. So that'll be really interesting. But I think they just they reduced their standards. They lost focus on what really mattered, and so their power is slowly waning. But their power was so extreme that it'll take a while. So I think it's for the next little bit going to look like people chipping at the edges. In K-12, I think it'll actually be more dramatic. Like, my kids go to school with kids that used to go to the most expensive private schools on the planet, and when I go to parent get-togethers, all of us are like, I couldn't, in good conscience, send my kids to the best other private schools that aren't, AI based because they would fall behind academically. It doesn't hold up. And so knowing that that is going to be accessible to everybody I think it'll change everything.
Well, Austin, I'm super excited to see the show. As soon as you have more information, I'm sure you're going to be posting about it. I'm definitely going to watch. Thank you so much for joining us. You could check out Austin, gauntletai.com, and then on X at Austin. Great follow on X. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yep. So, Nick, I have heard so many good things about Alpha School, and yeah, it is expensive. They have one here in San Francisco, but it is quite expensive. As he said, it was something like $40,000 a year. But yeah, effectively, you like the kids kind of quote unquote work for 2 hours a day, and then they learn other I don't know, real world skills or more like tangible skills, and it seems really cool.
I mean, it sounds like a school that I would have wanted to go to. And if you position an education like that, then yeah, sold.
Yeah.
While you're getting like the state-of-the-art education that you need to be effective in the workforce when you're ready to join it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like it's very experimental. And I went to quite an experimental elementary school, and I loved it, but like it doesn't always work, right? Experimental is by nature experimental, and thus not every single version of it is going to be great. But again, like I've just heard nothing but good things about Alpha
We're,
School.
we're going to have to talk more about that offline because I also went to an experimental private school in middle school. And I look back fondly now. I didn't always appreciate it when I was there, but we have our next guest here. So I think we should
Yeah,
move
absolutely.
this
Let's bring
train
him on.
along. So our next guest started his company in a college dorm room and took it public in 2015, I believe. He has one or two or many things to say about AI agents, which I'm sure we're going to talk about today. And most importantly, he wears a bomber jacket better than any CEO on the planet. That man is Aaron Levie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I think probably some people would take exception to the bomber jacket point, but
Ah,
happy to be here.
yeah.
Welcome
The
back,
rest the
Aaron.
rest were facts.
Good, good, good. Uh, all right. Well, starting off, I mean, yeah, there's a lot to get to today, but you know, you have seen multiple platform shifts at this point in your career. This chapter of Box seems distinct and special in a lot of ways. Like, how have you been able to push Box in the direction that you have, AI first, changing how people think about work in the enterprise? Like, what goes into that shift?
Yeah, this is unquestionably the biggest shift I've ever seen, and even before Box, I was fortunate enough to be in Seattle during the kind of '90s .com boom, and so in kind of middle school and high school got into technology, and also got to see that shift. So I would say, if you kind of mark the last 30 years of technology as you had the World Wide Web and kind of internet boom, you then had obviously a little bit of a lull, but then you had the cloud boom and then a mobile boom, sort of representing maybe three major kind of moments in technology. AI is unquestionably far bigger than any one of those, and I think it's on the order of the just fundamentally the PC and digitization itself. And we are, massively positioning the company and the platform to be able to take advantage of that, primarily because it's actually this dream come true for our technology. When we work with customers, they use Box to be able to organize, store, manage, secure their most important unstructured data and critical information. So think about your financial documents, your HR documents, your invoices, your contracts, your marketing assets, all of that data. And historically, you could only use that data when you're looking at it on a computer screen or you're searching for it and you know exactly what you're looking for. Those were the moments where you could get value from that information. Now, all of a sudden, every single file, every single object within our platform becomes available to an AI agent to be able to answer a question, to be able to extract or mine intelligence from, to be able to automate a workflow around. And so instead of this problem of you having this accumulation of more and more information over time, and then it's harder to understand what you have, you sort of invert it. And actually now the more information you have, the more signal that you now have within your organization to be able to answer any kind of question or topic that comes up. And so, there's been a lot of conversation recently around this idea of, context obviously being so fundamentally important for agents. Well, that context is often sitting inside of your critical business content. It's in your marketing plan and your product roadmap, and your research materials. It's in your financial documents and your contracts. So all of that content become context for AI agents. So that's why we're super excited, and we've kind of pivoted the whole company around that.
Aaron, you frequently talk about not just using AI to automate existing work, but to look for new areas of work that previously wouldn't have been possible without artificial intelligence. How link these two concepts together? What you're doing at Box, being able to extract context from documents that you previously couldn't, and
Yep.
then like using that to find those new areas of work.
Yeah, so we just yesterday announced a product called Box Extract, and what Box Extract does is let you deploy agents for data extraction on targeted sets of content within your Box account. And then we are working on having additional features that will tune those agents to that document, to the specifics of that content. So if you have invoices or contracts, then you obviously want to tune the prompts and the context that you're giving the system to better be able to capture the data from those documents. But what's amazing is that if you just go to the average organization, you say where are your contracts, where are your invoices, where are your marketing assets, where is your research materials. You don't have a structured way to find that data. You have to go into a bunch of folders, or you search for you happen to know the file name, you find that information, but you don't have a dashboard that shows you the latest in all of your contracts. You don't have an ability to kind of automate the process of your research workflow if you're in life sciences. This is just unstructured data that you've rarely been able to tap into in any kind of structured way. But inside of that content, what you have is all of this information. You have your client information, you have your research information, you have details about your marketing plans or your product roadmap. And once you get that intelligence, you can begin to either understand your business way better, or you can begin to automate workflows that previously you could never have automated because, again, you didn't know what was in that data. So this is to us one of these classic examples of just creating net new opportunity in our organization. Because previously you didn't have 20 people in a back office reading every single one of these documents, line by line and extracting the data. You just sat on the fact that you could never really understand what was in this information. And it's actually one of the kind of most classic, conversations we have with customers is they'll just tell us pre-AI, we don't really know what we even have. We have a petabyte of data. Maybe it's, 100 million files. We don't know what's in there. We don't know what is the contract that is going to, make or break some strategic decision that we're making. We don't know, which movie script is the one that will lead to the next blockbuster hit. We don't know which person worked on a project 2 years ago that actually would save us a bunch of time instead of kind of going and repeating the same work. All of that data is inside of our content. So if you can open it up, now all of a sudden you get all new opportunities inside of an organization to either generate more revenue, be able to accelerate work, spend less time in the areas that are not as strategic and shift that time elsewhere. So those are the kind of use cases that we're seeing from our customers. Less so about, okay, I'm just going to go replace a bunch of people that were doing something, much more often about, hey, now that I have, effectively unlimited intelligence, what are all the new things that I can go do with that?
So what are just real quick on that front, this use case, this capability makes complete sense. It's obvious, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Just like the value is so clear.
we actually want obvious use cases. So that's not a bad thing.
So what had to happen to make this a reality? Is it innovation on the model side? Is it scaffolding and infrastructure on your side? Like, why didn't this happen a year ago?
Yeah, well, we actually had the workings of the initial agent a year ago, but we also knew that you needed a bunch of scaffolding around that agent. You need to obviously do a lot of document kind of prep work to improve the agent's accuracy in being able to extract the data. You need scaffolding around, well, when do you run that agent? On what data do you run it? We have a feature that I'm sure I'll make some product managers mad that I'm kind of talking about it, but we have a feature that we built internally that will obviously start to expose to customers that will auto run your document against n number of models and then give you basically a table that says across all of these models, this was the data that we extracted with obviously our harness around that. So then you can just instantly know, empirically, okay, Gemini 3 is better for this, or Opus 4 or 5 is better for that, or Grok is better for that use case, or GPT 5.2 is better for that. And so we have to think about all of that you have to build out. You have to build an eval, kind of system. You have to make sure that the customer has their ground truth in the system. So these are the features that we're building out around Box Extract. Because when it comes down to, powering a mission critical process, let's say you're in banking or and you're in, legal or healthcare. It's not enough to just, upload your document and, give it to the AI model and just, sort of YOLO it and just hope you're getting back the right information. You do really want, all of the scaffolding around this to make sure that it works. And then just to ensure that that there's no risk of kind of, being bitter lessened on this. As the models improve, we're totally fine with that scaffolding becoming, sort of less and less. We're building in such a way where we want to capture all of the gains of the AI models, of the AI model improvements. And one of the things that I've learned is you just can't be sentimental with your technology right now. If a model can do something, that exceeds or even, is neutral to the scaffolding you built, you very quickly better get rid of your scaffolding and just take advantage of the model.
If we continue down that train of thought for a second, let's assume the models continue to get better and starting to eat of the Box's scaffolding, like what is Box's competitive advantage?
Yeah, well, I think there's scaffolding that improves the accuracy right now that we're doing stopgaps for the model, and then there's scaffolding that sort of is even in the most better lesson kind of scenario you still need. So you still want to be able to have your expected results, your ground truth, be able to compare against what you got. You still want to be able to have the model be targeted at a certain kind of set of data within your organization. You still need things like data security, access controls, permissions. You need to be able to process the information in a way that any document type can come in, and on the other end you get a normalized view of that data. So those are the things that we work on. We build lots of software that has little to do with AI, but we're only doing because of AI. And you need that technology scaffolding for lack of a better term, regardless of how good the model gets, because you need to be able to target the agent to go and do a particular task for you. And in working with things like box extract as one example, and some other features that we haven't yet announced, I've become more and more convinced that that these sort of applied use cases are not only more relevant than ever, but I don't think they go away as you get AI model progress. Simply because so many use cases in the enterprise need a repeated way of being delivered. When you actually get to a loan process, or you get to a FDA compliant clinical drug trial process in pharma, these are not things where a user wants to reprompt a system every time with all of its context over and over again. They're going to want applied solutions to these problems. And I think you're even seeing the labs start to recognize that. You're seeing these sort of branded products, OpenAI healthcare, even kind of co-work is obviously a kind of a version of this. And then there's an open question is, would you imagine having co-work for legal, co-work for, bio research? Because again, you don't want to go in and reestablish that relationship with that use case over and over again.
Aaron, something I've been thinking a lot about is how to surface some of the things that you can extract with box extract and other services, but like surface them more proactively. So two people are having a conversation in their team chat, and all of a sudden, the AI says, "Oh, hey, you're talking about this subject. What about this presentation you made 6 months ago that is somewhat relevant?" When do we get to something like that?
Really, that might be the better test of AGI than anything else we've seen, because you'd have to basically the moment you annoy people 3 times on that with the wrong tidbit, you're going to stop using it. And so I think the only tricky thing is that on proactive AI, I think the AI is a little bit eager to sort of try and find something relevant, because at some point you have to have a system prompt that says, like, when the user says something, go and find the relevant thing. And so how do you capture that nuance of what a human would know when to interject versus not? I maybe this would be the only area of model progress that I'm maybe still skeptical on, is I think the ambient AI that kind of interrupts you, is always a little bit of a tricky thing, simply because you on one hand wanted to interrupt a lot because that's how it adds value, and on the other hand, the moment that it gets noisy, you stop using it.
Is that solved by like just really good design, or there has to be something about the model that needs to change?
No, but like I mean, people have this problem as well. Like, you're in a Slack channel and you're like, no, I really hope this person doesn't reply yet, because I need to first, sort of resolve this other topic before that person interjects.
Yeah.
And because you're going back and forth with one person and somebody sneaks in a kind of unrelated thing, and often I'm actually the person doing the unrelated thing. But like, fortunately, nobody could turn me off Slack. I think when sort of Claude tries to jump in, too many times, you'd be like, okay, just chill out, Claude. Like we got this, and then come in a few minutes. Maybe that's a UX issue more than a model thing. It's like, when do you sort of finally, kind of turn on the ambient mode for that part of the conversation? I think it's a super fun brainstorm. I guess maybe my meta point is that, I think I'm sort of neutral to whether that is a dramatic change in productivity or not. But we'll see. I could be totally like maybe just a boomer on this one, and we just got to, see what the product looks like.
I think I'm with you. I'm going to be patient on this one. The sooner that happens, it feels like the sooner we get taken out of the loop. If it's anticipating our needs, then why are we here?
Well, actually, I'm not even worried about that one. I'm just worried about the noise factor. But I think the lesson for coding agents, I think, is going to carry over to most knowledge work, which is you still need to have some higher order context and judgment about what's being worked on that today the model just can't seem to get, and it can't seem to get for like obvious reasons. It has a context window limit that we don't have as people. It has you then suffer like, okay, well then is it going to grab data via RAG, in which case it only gets a certain amount of that context, and it might guess that it's the most important thing, but a human would know it's not, and an agent doesn't know it isn't. We have a lot of these things as we build agents internally for working on your content. We have these fun problems, which is, how does the agent know what it doesn't know about the thing that it's working on. Where you tell an agent, hey, go find me these 10 facts, and it maybe gives up after it finds 8 because it doesn't think there's 2 more, and it just thinks maybe the questioner got it wrong. But a human actually might have that judgment, which is just like, yeah, I actually just know for a fact that this information does exist, and you just haven't found it. So those are the types of things that the average knowledge worker that you work with, they know. They have that context kind of, and it's given to them for free. And so now we have this massive project across the economy, which is, how do you give agents this context? And how do you ensure that it's comprehensive? How do you ensure it's authoritative? How do you ensure that it gets kept up to date? These are actually going to be the gaps between, kind of full agentic enterprise and where we're at now, which is like the very early rollout stage. Some of the teams that have gotten, agent pilled, are ready to jump in on this, but not everybody has been able to work in this way.
I'm glad you said agent pill, because it seems like a lot of the economy is still very reluctant to adopt artificial intelligence. There's certainly a lot of hype around it, and I think people are kind of defensive against that hype. Are you seeing that with your clients? And then also more broadly, like how are you seeing people's general reaction to artificial intelligence on both the consumer side and the enterprise side?
Yeah, so on the enterprise side, I would say we're in a point of kind of incredible excitement and equally realistic pragmatism, where I think there's a general awareness that says, you know what, this stuff is amazing. We're very excited. We can't wait to be able to apply it to all of our workflows. And we know that the change management and the processes are going to take a while to actually get around this. If you go to most enterprises, I'm definitely at risk of totally making up numbers here, but if you go to most enterprises right now, their understanding of AI for coding is as a type ahead functionality, or you ask a question, you get some code back. All of us and anybody listening, we are we're in like an alien land right now, because we know that you run Claude Code for 10 hours and you have multiple sessions, and that's just a totally different way to work, and the rest of the world has not gotten there. And probably they won't get there without the right kind of scaffolding around that, because it's just so different from how people work today. Yeah. that it's like such a leap in mental model that it's just going to be hard for most people to kind of get around that. So now take that and bring that same analogy to a non-technical worker. So we're talking about technical workers across the economy not yet using Claude Code. What do you do when you're talking to a non-technical worker that is just doing their knowledge work, their daily work on, reviewing contracts, generating marketing assets, et cetera? We have some ways to go. So I think that, that the good news is, if you're building an AI, the window is not closed. We are still in the very early stages. And I think there's just an incredible opportunity, ahead for anybody building agents right now.
What do you think about outside of enterprise, outside of business? The sentiment currently seems to be quite negative. You have everything from being unimpressed with the progress, which is crazy to me. You have outright hatred in some cases. What do you think that
electricity
that's
bills
about? Yeah.
Well, I think actually Matt sort of answered what it's about at the exact end of that sentence, which is electricity bills and these other things that kind of make great headlines, which are come as a consequence of the AI build out that's happening. But I think that it's one of these things which is, everybody wants AI for the stuff that they don't do. And then they are maybe nervous, again, for very good reason in some cases, about AI for the things that they do. So if you're an artist, you are maybe there's some sort of fear of what does AI do to that craft, but a second later you might go ask AI about a healthcare question. And so we have this really interesting kind of juxtaposition of I don't want my job taken away, but I want to be able to get all of the benefits of AI for everything else in my life. And I think that's maybe the kind of initial starting point. But then what I do think happens, again, I want to be sympathetic and thoughtful about, there are some areas that will experience some compression. So I can't be completely naive to that element. But I think in a lot of areas, the professionals that started out saying AI is going to come after my job or be able to do my job very quickly realized, no, actually, the limitations of these systems prevent a novice using AI in my field to replace me with AI, because they need to, or just the AI itself doing the job, because you need to have a high degree of judgment of when did the AI get something wrong and when did it get it right. I asked AI a legal question the other day, every leading model, and it was overly conservative about the topic because it's not trained to kind of be like, a little bit like, liberal in interpretation and aggressive on certain things. And then I called a top law firm, and they were like, yeah, this is not going to be a problem. And so if I was just, again, a casual user asking the system a question, and I'm getting like the most bubble wrapped advice on a thing, but then in real life, that the real life person knows all the context of, okay, the actual specifics of the situation, and maybe it's up to me because I didn't prompt it the right way, but the human has they have all that context in their head. They have 10 billion tokens of context in their head about the topic. So instantly that human is 10 times better than the AI query I did. But guess what? I probably wouldn't have talked to the human if I hadn't done the AI query. So it actually got me into that conversation because of the sort of ease at which I was even, pursuing the topic. So I think what happens is you have a lot of experts that quickly realize, wait a second, like, I'm a really good engineer, and I now use AI to do all of this stuff that I really hate doing. Like, I hate updating packages, and I hate updating libraries for a new version. And I hate fixing that bug, and I don't really like having to deal with that security issue. Like, I want AI to do all that, and then I want to spend my time figuring out the system design and figuring out the features to build, and none of that goes away because of AI. And so my friends that are like, who people would just consider like, okay, these are like top engineers, like that cohort of people, they love AI because they don't have to work on all of the stupid stuff that used to drown their time. It's like incredible that the best engineer in the world and the worst engineer in the world all eventually had to do the same set of things for 60% of the project that they were working on. And it was just the advantage of the 10x engineer that high leverage kind of back-end system design, that they could just do that faster. But all the other work, they were slowed down by in the exact same way as everybody else. Now all of a sudden that work goes away, and that high leverage engineer, that 10x engineer, all of a sudden now becomes a 100x engineer, and they love it. So I think you're going to see that across fields.
Specifically, if I can just interrupt for a second, do you think Claude Cowork is that kind of entry point into having the same impact to kind of general knowledge work that Claude Code had on engineering?
I think it's certainly possible. I think that it has the sort of makings and scaffolding for that. I think there are going to be some nuances that again are different between code and everything else. Like code, you have this great property of just did the code run and did it work? And you have, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but you have a lot of engineers right now that are just like, okay, like Claude Code built this thing. I'm gonna just run it I'm gonna run it and see if it works. And I'm not going to go review the 10,000 lines of code to see, how good is the code. I'm just going to see if it runs. You can do that in code because nobody actually sees the code of the thing that you built. They just see the end result. Did you automate that task? Did you build the website, etc.? Conversely, just 2 minutes ago, as a kind of a continued test, I had Cowork generate a PowerPoint file, or edit a PowerPoint file, and it sort of added an extra bullet point beyond the viewport of the PowerPoint. And so I can't go and just like in the same way that an engineer could just like ship this website. I have to go look through and go check all of its work, and so that will be a new behavior that people have to learn and figure out. I actually think that will be the future of work, but it will mean that the style of work that a knowledge worker is doing will probably change maybe a couple clicks more than the engineer, because the engineer has a couple tools. It's all text. It's like already a pretty great self-contained AI environment, whereas the knowledge worker has we have this clunky desktop software or cloud software that has weird formatting issues. Like there's not like an amazing format for PowerPoint files. You have to like get in there, and the bowels of the format are pretty messy, and you change one line, the whole thing kind of blows up stylistically. You have to navigate pretty hostile terrain in terms of email systems and other environments that are pretty high risk if you modify something or you send a note to somebody in the wrong way. So I think it will take a little bit longer for how much will change on the knowledge worker side. However, we are obviously massive believers that is the future of work. And as the AI models progress, those will just get better and better and better. And you'll just trust the system more and more, and you'll let it go off and run and do larger and larger areas of work. One kind of very salient, easy to understand use case is we have an agent that we've sort of publicly announced, but more to come, that will just do kind of your general purpose document related activities. And a very classic use case is, hey, I have to respond to an RFP, and here are the 50 pages of prior RFPs and all product documentation that I get back that we have around this. And that maybe would be a 2 or 3 hour exercise of like copying and pasting each thing, reading each line. Now you just have an agent go and do it, comes back in 10 minutes, it's fully written out, and you only spend 5 minutes checking its work. So that kind of leverage, 10x leverage in a workflow, I think will come for most areas of knowledge work. And this is just going to roll out more and more over time.
All right, that's super exciting. Congratulations on Box Extract. Aaron, as always, we love having you on the show. So go check out box.com, Box Extract. Find them on @Levie on Twitter, and please come back again.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Talk soon. So, Matt, our first in-person live show was at BoxWorks.
That's right. Yeah, it was. That was a lot of fun, and
That was a lot of
hopefully
fun.
we get to do it again.
Yeah. Never forget that blue desk.
Yeah. We have our next guest. I think we just bring him right on.
All right, let's keep going. So up next, we have Tudor Achim, co-founder and CEO of Harmonic, where they are developing an AI reasoning engine rooted in formal mathematics rather than just language. Tudor, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. How are you today?
I'm sure it's been a quite exciting week and a half, 2 weeks for you.
It's been really exciting. It's nice to see these problems just falling.
Yeah, so let me set some of the context I want to ask you about this week specifically, and then help me fill in the gaps. But so this thing went absolutely viral this week. 2 people, supposedly with the help of GPT 5.2 Pro and your tool, Aristotle, were able to solve 3 Erdos problems, some of the most complex, time-consuming mathematical problems in the world. How did this happen? Why is it such a big deal? And what about that did I get wrong? Because I'm sure I missed some points.
No, that's basically right. I mean, there's a lot of activity right now on open problems. For a bit of background, these Erdos problems were posed by a Hungarian mathematician named Paul Erdős. He was an interesting guy, so he would couch surf on mathematicians' couches around the world, and he would just work with them for a couple of days and then move on. As part of this process, he also left behind a collection of problems that he couldn't solve within a few days, and those are called the Erdős problems. So I wouldn't say they're the most time-consuming problems in the world. If you think of Millennium Prize problems like Mount Everest, I would say the Erdős problems are more like, difficult foothills. So you certainly wouldn't make your career solving them as a mathematician, but you'd certainly be proud and happy that you did that. So
are these open problems, or are they generally solved and it's just very difficult?
Oh no, they're open problems. So they don't have solutions. People, check pretty carefully. But not all open problems are the same. I think Millennium Prize problems, they're open and lots of people work on them. I think Erdős problems, people kind of take a punt on them once in a while. But I will say that 2 years ago, AIs could barely solve high school math problems. So the fact that they're now attacking problems that other mathematicians have looked at before is pretty incredible.
And who were these 2 people? Were they just random people, or did they have a background in mathematics?
I'm not 100% sure. So they're just our users.
I know one of them was, I believe, a quantitative researcher. So definitely a background in mathematics. But maybe, Tudor, you could just talk about what is the interplay between GPT 5.2 Pro, Harmonic, talk about how
totally.
it was actually done.
So again, I wasn't involved in the solving process, but as far as I can understand from what's been published online, these users took an Erdos problem, they chatted with GPT-5 to get to what they thought was a solution, and then to triple check it, they gave it to Aristotle to do a process called auto-formalization. And auto-formalization, it turns an English proof, an English math proof, into a computer language called Lean, and then a computer can check if that lean proof is correct.
Is
Now,
that is that vibe math?
to be sure, in December, other people solved Erdos problems directly with Aristotle, but there's a mode you can run it in where it checks other proofs. And what was the question about lean?
No, I was wondering if you're going to call this vibe mathing.
Well, vibe proving, my co-founder Vlad came up with that term, and I think it's a great one. You know, vibe proving, vibe coding, two sides of the
So
same coin.
is this a significant moment? Does this represent a significant moment to you? If so, why is this so important?
Well, of course, it's significant to me just because you know we've built this company around the idea of helping mathematicians, and so the fact that they're getting value from it is incredible. I think for the field, there's two items of significance. The first one is, as I mentioned, I think this is part of a smooth trend in math problem-solving capabilities. So if you look 2 years ago, they could barely solve high school problems, and then the question was, can they solve high school contest problems? Okay, then they did that. Then the question was, well, can they do well at the IMO? And then they did well at the IMO. And then the question was, okay, these are just Olympiads. Can they do all research math? And of course, we haven't solved Millennium Prize yet, but you can now solve research math problems.
Do you
But
think that, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say real quick, I think actually for me, what's more significant, this is more of a threshold moment, is that formalization with AI has gone from being very difficult and essentially impossible a year ago to being part of the proof becoming accepted by mathematicians very quickly. So previously, if one solved an Erdos problem, they would have to get a professor to essentially vouch for the correctness of the proof, which is very time consuming, and they're putting their reputation on the line. This completely democratizes it. So now anybody in the world can like try to use AI, solve some stuff, and if they can formalize it, everyone can be sure it's correct. And now the question might be, you know, how significant is it? But at least you're not wasting time just like cranking through the steps yourself.
Yeah, and because you have that formalization, that's also a feedback loop for the AI to get better, right?
That's exactly right. You know, when we started Harmonic, there were two reasons we focused on formal math. So the first one was we thought it would be helpful to our users. The thought experiment was, well, what if you ask an AI in 10 years to prove the Riemann hypothesis, you'll get 100,000 pages of English text, which you might as well throw in the trash can because it's probably wrong and you can't really decipher it. So first of all, having a formal proof, you know, it's correct, you can jump around definitions and really understand it. We also thought it would make it more efficient to do reinforcement learning to make it smarter at math, which we've also seen, you know, prove itself out as a hypothesis. But the main value is to the user just knowing that the output's correct.
Okay, and do you think that these models are generalizing to figure out the math, or is it are for the Erdos problems, are they in the training set? This is like the big question, right?
I haven't seen evidence yet of fundamentally new techniques that are completely different from any techniques people have used before. But certainly these solutions are not in the training set. So the models are bringing together techniques, and that's really what a lot of mathematicians do anyway. You're thinking, okay, here's all the techniques I know about. Here's a very creative way to combine them and try to bring some bounds down. So I would say this is like real mathematical reasoning that's new.
So you've talked about math as this ultimate form of reasoning. Can you explain that what that means in layman's terms? Like why is that your view of the
Yeah,
world?
yeah.
Why is that so important?
I think that a lot of people think of math as like arithmetic, you know, stuff you can plug into a calculator or Excel. The reality is that math encompasses all of logic. And so when people think of reasoning, whether it's in the context of math or, you know, mortgage calculations or theoretical chemistry or physics or even business operations, ultimately anything that you can express as an objective sequence of steps that somebody else could verify on their own as being correct, that's logic. And we think of that as mathematical reasoning. Now, you see in humans, if somebody gets really good at math, it doesn't generalize to all fields, but certainly somebody very good at math can tend to go pick up programming or other quantitative fields. And so those are the two ways in which you think of like math generalizes. First of all, as an underlying, you know, technique for reasoning, it tends to generalize to other fields, and also expressing problems in the language of logic to us makes them math problems.
Tudor, do you think that there's a single algorithm to encompass everything?
That's a tough question. I mean, in some sense, humans are a single algorithm to encompass everything because we've gone from, we've evolved essentially from bacteria to something that can create like semiconductors. I wouldn't say that any AI algorithm I know of right now is the single algorithm to encompass everything, but there's at least an existence proof for how to get there.
Okay. And why do you think people, especially, folks who are not kind of deep in mathematics, get so excited when they hear about artificial intelligence, either discovering new science, discovering new math? Why is that such an attractive idea?
Well, I don't know why everyone thinks that, but I think one thing is that it's kind of refreshing. I think there's a doom and gloom narrative right now around AI. It's going to take everyone's jobs. It's going to remove meaning in people's lives. So I think it's pretty exciting when AI is not kind of automating everything people already do, but actually unlocking new heights of knowledge. You could easily imagine AI figuring out cures to cancer, better ways to do fusion, scaling up energy production. There's so many things that we're really knowledge bottlenecked on. And the fact that AI can start to help us with that, I think, is just a grand vision. I think anybody could get excited about it.
Yeah. There's a
Totally
lot.
agree. We talk about this brand problem all the time. We were just talking to Aaron about it a little bit too. And when you can reframe the narrative a little bit on solving real world problems, curing diseases, like you said, lowering energy costs, suddenly the narrative flips and it becomes a lot more exciting.
I think everyone
So
should be excited about it. Yeah, it's
yeah,
going to do great things.
yeah. So this is you'll have to walk me through this, but I have a pretty good idea of how we're making language models smarter, more sophisticated. How do you do that with this mathematically focused model? What actually goes into that? How are you innovating?
Yeah, absolutely. It's similar in nature to how language models improve. Now, for anyone watching this, we've actually published a technical report on how we built the system that won gold at the IMO last year, or gold medal performance. And I think we're very open compared to other labs. So the key item is that when other labs do reinforcement learning, they're using fuzzy reward signals. So they're looking at English text and checking whether that text looks good or not. And that's obviously been very effective. These models are competitive, they're very good, they're useful. We take that one step further, and instead of relying on a reward signal that's just based on fuzzy English, we end up getting a reward signal based on whether a lean compiler accepts a proof of something or not. And that actually makes it pretty data efficient to get good at mathematical reasoning because that can be expressed in this language. Now, of course, it's not necessarily the most valuable thing if you're trying to write good history essays, but we're really interested right now in the quantitative domains where this kind of feedback is helpful.
It seems like when you think about self-improving artificial intelligence, it needs to get really good at coding and math. And so do you think about that of like, hey, we're pushing these models forward to be incredibly good at math. Eventually, hopefully, we'll get to the point where it's actually discovering new math, and then it can apply that to itself, whether that's kind of an algorithmic upgrade, an efficiency upgrade. Like, how do you think about that?
Uh, I mean, we published some results where the IMO model we ran was then able to do pretty well in software verification benchmarks. And those are pretty tricky benchmarks where you have to write proofs that your code is correct. I absolutely think that mathematical reasoning generalizes to code, to other areas of like science, like physics and theoretical chemistry. I don't think the limits are just at like pure math like we've been seeing now.
Hmm. So yeah, what is the end goal for Harmonic? What are you working towards here?
We would love to contribute to a Millennium Prize by 2028. I mean, I think, in 2023, it was kind of crazy to talk about that. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of people also thought like the IMO was like a crazy thing to do. Um, but now it just seems
Describe
like
the
more and more
Millennium Prize.
possible. Sorry?
Can you describe the Millennium Prize? Like, what is it?
Yeah, yeah. In 2000, the Clay Mathematics Institute selected some problems that have been open for a while, and they said, well, if you solve one of these, we'll give you $1 million. Of course, there's like a lot of other benefits to it, but I think only one of them has been solved so far, the Poincare conjecture. That was by Grigori Perelman in 2002 or three, I think. And there's a bunch of them left. One of them is Riemann hypothesis. Another one you might have heard of is P versus NP. It's like a fundamental question about computing. And uh, at some point, AI is just going to solve all of these, and it would be great for Harmonic to be a part of that. The days, I think, in which one would think that one model would dominate all others, I think are long gone. Nobody spends more than 50% of the total like training compute on math. So I think it's going to be a multipolar world. You can ensemble lots of models that'll be good at different things and kind of fill each other's gaps. So I just think it's going to be incredible to see like what Aristotle can do, what combination of Aristotle and other models can do. It's going to be a golden age, I think, for math research.
What does solving these problems do for society, for humanity?
I mean, there's so much. So the Riemann hypothesis, it's the foundation for a lot of other math. So first of all, if we find that it's false, that'll be really problematic for research all down the stack, even stuff that might, touch theoretical physics, right? It changes your understanding of the universe. P versus NP is a fundamental result that talks about how efficiently you can compute things. If it turns out that P equals NP, which is a bit of a spicy take, but we haven't proven it's not true, then that actually collapses a lot of algorithms and a lot of security guarantees break down. So those problems are a little bit removed. I mean, the reason they're so significant is that they have so many downstream implications.
Mhm.
So it's not like a specific thing changes for you or me if one of those things is proven or not. But just think of them as keys to unlock very deep understanding across the board of the universe.
So are mathematicians in general really excited about AI, or is it divisive in some communities?
That's a good question. I think mathematicians are coming around. I mean it's a great tool. Like, in the same way that compilers save programmers. I mean, we used to write assembly, right, as programmers, and now compilers came around, you can write C, and then interpreters came around, you can write Python. Now you can write so much more code. I think for mathematicians, these tools all of a sudden, whereas previously they'd have to spend a day solving a subproblem of their research agenda, now they just ship it off to some agent and it comes back with a proof. So I think most mathematicians are going to embrace this. It's just going to make them so much more productive. And I think one key thing, by the way, is I think the formalization is a game changer because right now the refereeing process for math is like a mathematician has to sit down and just double check that what another mathematician did was correct. That's probably 90% of the effort in reviewing papers. Imagine 90% of the effort in coordinating human mathematicians, that just goes away. That's going to be a huge game changer, completely independent of how smart AI gets at solving new problems.
Are you also having to build, so you're obviously training this model and it's incredibly good at math. And so like if you think of it as analogous to Claude, the Claude core model, then they built Claude code around it, the harness to actually get the most out of the intelligence of the model. What is that? What is the analogy to what you're building? Do you need to also build scaffolding around it?
We've essentially built that. That's what our API does. It's a system that essentially lets you delegate agentically the solving of a math problem. So right now, again, some users use GPT and other models, and that's totally fine. But with Aristotle in the API, you can literally just submit a math problem in English and then let it crank for a long time. And it'll make a bunch of progress. Maybe it won't finish, maybe it does. But either way, you get your trace of verified output as you go. And I think that kind of cloud-hosted agentic experience is actually really good for mathematicians. They just shoot off a bunch of jobs, they check on them once in a while, and at the end you end up with like a verified proof.
All right, so I guess the question becomes, when AI is able to solve one of these Millennium Prize problems, is it fair to say that AI has reached this level of reasoning capabilities that is broadly more or exceeds human levels? Is that kind of what we're saying, or not quite?
Well, I think once an AI does it entirely on its own, yeah, I think you can say it's safely exceeded human levels. I I wouldn't say these Erdős problems are evidence that we've made a step change towards Millennium Prize problems, by the way.
Okay.
Millennium Prize problems require sparks of insight, right? And not just kind of clever repackaging resistant techniques. So, uh, we're still waiting to see those sparks. I mean, they're going to come, but it's
All right,
not.
Tudor, I'm going to put you on the spot. What's the prediction? When are we going to solve these problems?
I think 2028, and it's a pretty good bet.
Okay. All right.
I
Very
actually
fair
wasn't
prediction.
expecting you to give a very specific year.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
no, I
always
appreciate
appreciate
that.
a
Wait,
specific.
why? What's the context for 2028? What happens then?
Well, I just think the rate of progress, I just kind of extrapolate it, and I've learned that I'm a little too conservative in my predictions. So I think the IMO was like quite a challenging one. We did it. So, I'm just betting I think there's like a decent chance that, things keep happening at a good enough rate that we hit it. I also think that with how much compute is being thrown into this and how fast humans are ramping up on using the tools, the chance that like all human insight plus like AI helping agentically all over the place, the chance that that's not enough to tackle at least one millennium problem, it just, it just keeps dropping exponentially for me. So I'll stick to 2020 as my bet. Maybe
All right,
sooner,
we'll
maybe
have you back on
27.
yeah. We'll have you back on in 2028.
Yeah, all right, Tudor, it's been an absolute pleasure. Congrats on all the excitement this week. Check out Harmonic at harmonic.fun, and then you can also check out Tudor on X, T Achim. We will drop all of those in the description below. Tudor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, guys. This is super fun. Have
Thank
fun.
you.
See you later. Yeah, I think I'm like whenever I see progress like this, specifically with AI being used to solve science, to solve math, I get so excited about it, especially when we start talking about kind of recursive self-improvement, and that is just extremely exciting. Obviously, there's a tinge of fear there, but it's mostly excitement, and I just love to see these models get better and better, and being able to do incredible feats like the IMO. Like it's just so fun to watch.
And to be fair, in a space that I don't have really deep understanding or knowledge, I think for me the reason why I would echo your sentiment is because it's like it seems like proof of real progress. Like this is like real value being created potentially. And like he said, if these models can start to fix real world problems, like that's the future I get excited about.
Yeah, and when he talks about kind of we're going to need sparks of new ideas. Once the
Right.
models are capable of that, we're really going to see an acceleration of everything, of science, of math. We're going to have new material sciences. I mean, it's that's the future I'm extremely excited about, especially when we're talking about health and medicine and yeah, whenever somebody has kind of a more pessimistic outlook of artificial intelligence, I usually point them to that as like,
Yeah.
hey, this is something truly to get excited about while also not being naive about the potential downsides.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
All
All
let's
right.
bring on our next guest.
Time for our last guest of the day. This is going to be a good one. So, last guest is Ara Kazarian, the lead economist, excuse me, at Ramp, a rapidly growing fintech company that helps with everything from corporate cards, expense management, bill pay, and they have thousands and thousands of customers now. Everyone from Shopify to Anduril to Notion. And what this means is that they have a treasure trove of economic data, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So, Ara, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the show.
How you doing today?
Nice to meet you.
Great. I'm on the road, so you're seeing me in a slightly different background than I usually have.
Well, very good. Yeah, excited to chat. So, starting off, let's just talk about what you do at Ramp. Give us the overview.
Sure. So Ramp is a financial operations platform. So corporate card, bill pay, treasury, all of that accounting stuff. What that really means for me as an economist is that I have this really great data set of business spend. So it's where and how American businesses are spending and moving their money. It's $100 billion of spend annually across 50,000 businesses. And that's extremely powerful. Now, there's a lot of economists at financial services organizations, at banks. Most of the research that they do focus on consumer spend. There's not a lot having to do with business spend, particularly in this world where a lot of the development that's happening, a lot of the spend that's happening is in these private markets. So a lot of the research that we do has to do with the spending on AI model companies and AI platforms and services. We see that directly from where companies on our platform are putting their dollars and budgets.
And so you just put out a report. Tell us a little bit about what that report, like what is it and how people should be thinking about it.
Sure. So our main flagship research is called Ramp AI Index. This is tracking broadly the share of companies in the United States that are paying for AI models and services. So overall, we found, first of all, there's a big gap in tracking this. Census has its own measurement that comes from survey data. We found that the census measurement is probably not accurate and is likely undercounting the number of businesses that use it. In our estimate, we have about 46.6% of businesses are already adopting AI in some way. And most of that is OpenAI. OpenAI is the leader as far as being at the most businesses. A lot of growth in the last year. Started to slow down a little bit over the past couple months and then shot back up this past month. And there's a very competitive industry here too. So we see Anthropic also growing business adoption very quickly, and then Gemini, also a very big player in this market.
And Ara, in the report, you talk about why the census might have been underreporting. Talk about what they were reporting, what the number was, how they were asking the question, and then what changed and where they're at now.
Sure. I mean, it really gets at what's so hard about measuring even the question of like, what is AI adoption? What is AI use at all, right? So this is a really big question that you're trying to resolve, particularly in economics nowadays. There's a lot of hope that AI is going to be the technology that's going to launch the United States into the next era of a productivity boom. It's going to be really hard to measure that using productivity statistics. Those are often pretty volatile, and any kind of new technology takes a long time to actually show up in where and how businesses are operating. There's a learning curve to employees learning how to use a new technology to make them better at their jobs. So at the same time, we have a lot of money going into the AI sector. And so you want some kind of measurement to suggest, hey, is this actually driving any benefit to the companies that are paying for it? Or is this all just, a useless bubble? So there's two major measurements of that. One is a census measurement. This is a survey that goes out to businesses every 2 weeks, and it more or less asks them a question. At least for about 2 years, it was asking them this question: do you use AI to produce goods and services? That's pretty much what the question was. And for about 2 years, the estimate hovered at around 3 to 6, 7% of businesses who said they were using AI. And if you're someone who watches the industry very closely, you would look at those numbers and you say, that sounds really low. Particularly because it wasn't really budging, even though we saw more and more businesses talking about it in earnings calls, saying that they were using AI. The development of the AI tools themselves got much better, so you could imagine someone was probably using more of it, and yet it was hovering around this level. And then private estimates were saying something very different. So the second way of measuring it, you can use actual spend data. So that's what we started doing at Ramp, is that we saw the actual money movements that were happening, where businesses were not only spending on AI models from OpenAI and Anthropic, but increasingly spending on other kinds of platforms, or like the Cursors of the world, or out-of-the-box solutions to actually augment their customer service or sales platforms. And if you use spend data to measure AI adoption, you saw a very different estimate, not like 6, 7, 8%, but 45%, 46%. And an estimate that also skyrocketed over the course of 2025 as the market became much more competitive. Now, there was a lot of criticism, therefore, over the last year, including, by the way, from me, of sensitive data, to say that, hey, this question doesn't really make sense. Do you use AI to produce goods and services? It's a weird question, right? Like goods and services. Yeah, confusing. Goods and services is AI, is like econ speak. Most people don't talk like that. That's the first reason. And the second reason is, I think the question made sense when it was written. Where the idea was to measure the impact of AI on actual production. But since then, the AI product ecosystem has expanded more so to build products and, augmenting other parts of a business. Maybe not exactly like producing widgets on a factory floor, but certainly making engineers more productive, salespeople, marketing folks, designers, sort of internal business functions of a company, customer service. And so over the last 2 years, more and more people have been saying, hey, we should probably revise this question. It doesn't really make sense for how the AI product ecosystem is developed. And Census came around to that, and now in their last estimate, they changed the question. So it went from, do you use AI to produce goods or services, to do you use AI for any business function? Much more sensible question, and the adoption rate almost doubled. So we went from about 8% of businesses saying they use AI to about 18%.
But you still see a large discrepancy between that data and your own. What do you make of that delta?
So it's two things. So you're right? Because census estimate says 18% of businesses use AI. Ramp's estimate says 45, 46%. So I think it's two major things. One is that I don't think Ramp data is ever going to be perfectly representative of the entire economy until Ramp takes over the world and has everyone on the platform. I don't sell the product,
it skews towards technology companies?
It's not that it skews toward tech companies, because we actually don't have a particular sector skew in our data set. It's more so, I think, that it skews toward at least tech forward companies. So even the construction companies on our platform, or the manufacturers, or the restaurants on our platform, they're typically going to be the kinds of businesses that would otherwise want to use some kind of new technology, just by nature of the fact that they're using something like Ramp, which is itself already this like AI finance automation tool. And so I think any of the businesses on our platform are more likely to use some new and exciting tech, including AI.
All right. If you're looking at spend data, is there a chance that a company has purchased ChatGPT licenses, but maybe aren't actually using them because, let's say some manager said, okay, we have to get on this AI train, everybody buy a ChatGPT account. But, I think culturally they're not adopting it and actually using it. Do you think that could be happening? And what is the margin for error there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what you're getting at is one of the key questions in the research today, which is, well, where do you draw the line on adoption? Because in our measurement, the implication is that adoption just means you buy an enterprise chat subscription or just spend a lot of money on an API. But that doesn't actually say how people are using it. Now, I will say that we have some other research that shows that it's not just money being spent, right? The contract sizes are getting bigger, and then the retention of these products is getting bigger, is growing. So like now we're at about like 80% retention year over year for an AI contract, versus a couple of years ago we were about 60. So what those two things tell us is that if you are a financially conscious CFO at a company, you generally do not extend a contract for a large software vendor, certainly if it's like $1 million and spend a year, unless you find there's some benefits or usage happening at your firm. And so if we assume that these budgets are CFOs voting with their dollars, they seem to be voting in favor of moving out of the sort of experimental pilot program focus of AI into a more these are large, significant investments we're making that we're already seeing some gains from. Therefore, we're going to double down and increase the contract sizes.
Apparently, you get in a lot of trouble if you buy $1 million software and no one uses it.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that's like, there's this conversation about the AI bubble. And so the assumption is like, oh, all these people are just, all these CFOs are just, or CEOs, CFOs, whoever the executives are just saying that they're using AI because of this hype train. Like, costs a lot of money to say you're using this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I don't think most of the executives in this market are acting so haphazardly. I think they are, at least also from the people that we talk to, being very conscious about which provider they're going with. Increasingly, there's also multi-homing. You're not just signing up for one AI. You're not just doing OpenAI stuff. You're also increasingly going to sign up for some services from Anthropic or Gemini. And so you don't have to do that if you're just doing this for show.
Oh. All right. So actually, on that front, real quick, if you're going to scan through X, it seems like the general perception is that Anthropic is the enterprise AI company. And so in my head, I think, oh, well, maybe they have more adoption in the enterprise. But what your data indicates is that it's actually OpenAI. Is that right?
There are a lot of different ways to look at it. Like, OpenAI is definitely at the most businesses. It's, I think, in part because of its almost default status as the consumer product. Like, a lot of people do just think of AI usage as going on to ChatGPT. That it has also become almost this default component of spend for many businesses. I mean, 35% of businesses on our platform, more so, already subscribe to OpenAI in some way. And that's in part because, hey, if you're going to do some AI investment, you ought to start with a ChatGPT enterprise subscription. So there's that. But Anthropic customers also tend to spend more. Anthropic tends to lead much more heavily into the tech sector, lean much more heavily into large API spend and large contracts there. And so it is a very competitive market. If you're looking beyond just adoption, just looking at dollars spent on these tools, Anthropic for sure is a very competitive player in the enterprise space.
All right, as you're seeing the spend on AI increase, the adoption of AI increase, are you seeing other sectors, SaaS, decrease in parallel?
Here's the way I usually say it is that if you look at Ramp spend and you divide by sort of sector to subsector, as in like the fastest growing part of Ramp spend is companies spending on other tech companies. So that means tech companies spending on other AI services, but also spending just broadly on a SaaS ecosystem. And so I have no evidence in our data set that suggests that there's a broader slowdown in software spend overall.
Okay, so just to clarify, I think you cut out just for a second. You are seeing the spend on software outside of artificial intelligence also increasing.
Yes.
Because
Outpaced by AI spend. AI spend is increasing faster for sure.
there was a sentiment, not unscientific, that kind of spend on SaaS, people were getting sick of per seat pricing, and they were just trying to reduce their spend and reduce the number of vendors that they were paying. Did you see that? And then I guess you're saying that this kind of the trend is going the other direction now, if you did see that then?
Well, I've heard the same anecdotally, and I think we're, increasingly there's all this talk about, well, how are we going to start to price these AI software contracts, right? When we head into this agentic world where more of the product that's being provided is the work that's being done for you, and not necessarily the number of people that are using the software. It's all going to be done in the background. So I think there are a lot of reasonable conversations about how this market is going to develop there. But it's going to be difficult to measure in the short term, especially because we are in this market right now where there is a truly unprecedented number of companies coming online, like startups and software companies coming online to sell their services. Development is so much faster and easier. And alongside that, you're seeing a lot of companies on our platform want to experiment with these new tools and services. Like, you could say that I think a lot of the sentiment that you're expressing is coming from frustration with a lot of the enterprise software providers, and saying, well, they're not keeping up with the software development that's happening. And that, therefore, that is being replaced by, new upstarts, where it's not that the spend is disappearing, but it is shifting over to new and emerging companies.
So at the top, you mentioned you're not seeing a bubble. Let's talk a little bit more about that specifically. I think critics are obviously making the argument that we're going to see this CapEx bubble. There's no ROI. Now you're seeing the inverse. You're seeing healthy spend. You're seeing that spend actually grow. What other variables are you including in your kind of conclusion here?
So usually when people talk about whether or not there's an AI bubble, there's two parts to it. So one part is, are the model companies themselves spending way too much money on capital, and money that they won't be able to recoup through revenue? I do not touch that part of this conversation. I have no dog in the race about whether or not we're building too many data centers. What I do have, though, is data about whether or not companies are increasingly spending on these AI models and tools and finding value. And that's the part of the AI bubble conversation that I do have a point on, where I would say, if people think that this is just haphazard spend, or spend that's not producing any value for the companies that are sort of making these investments, the companies are telling us, both anecdotally but also where they are spending their money, that they want more, they continue to spend more, and they continue to find value through these products and services, as shown by their higher retention rates. They're more likely to extend the contracts year over year, and the contracts are getting bigger year over year. So those are the two main components of the argument that I think the conversation is missing. Like, there's a lot of focus on the data that is publicly available, because that's all we generally have for a debate. And the publicly available data is, hey, this large model company is building this factory or data center, therefore it's all a waste of money. There's not a lot of publicly available data on whether or not the products they are making are actually useful to their end users and companies. And so that's what I try to illuminate with our research, by showing that, hey, at least right now, we're seeing a growing market and a pretty healthy market for this kind of stuff.
What type of growth and adoption are you seeing for, let's say, AI companies, but that aren't the frontier labs, whether it's text to video, text to image, things like Manus and like what are you seeing there?
Well, the model companies one of the actual interesting things that we added to our research about a year ago now was DeepSeek. There's this whole hysteria about DeepSeek being a threat to the AI, DeepSeek, the Chinese AI model company, being a threat to the American frontier model companies. And it really never budged a tiny fraction of adoption of US businesses. There was some experimentation. I think we had like 0.02% of businesses trying out DeepSeek in that first month or so. But it never ended up being something that caught on. Now, that's not going to be the case with every model company. I think DeepSeek was a very special case in that companies in the US are very unlikely to send their data to a Chinese model company. But your question does get at something very significant about this sector, which is how much dynamism there is. I mean, one of the pieces of research we put out last year too was talking about AI code editors. So if you remember 2 years ago, for example, it was pretty much just GitHub Copilot. It was a dominant code editor for an AI code editor. Enterprise used it. It's backed by Microsoft. It's 100% of the market. 6 months later, Cursor comes out. It's 50-50 with Cursor. Cursor, like at this point, only has like a dozen or 2 dozen people working there, already 50% of the market, and took that market share away from Microsoft essentially. That's extremely rare. You don't see that kind of dynamism in most software ecosystems. And so I think an underrated part of this conversation and debate is how much of the market is, there's really no clear winner in this industry. I mean, there's going to be people with advantages. I think Google has a huge distributional advantage. They make Gemini for free with all their workspace products. So I think Google's adoption is actually probably underrated, even in our research. ChatGPT, OpenAI has a huge distributional advantage in just that it was first. It's at the most businesses. And yet, I don't think any of these companies should rest on their laurels and not expect to potentially be disrupted very quickly. XAI, I mean, is also fairly new. Really just started in the last year and is already at a single-digit share of adoption in the US.
All right,
that's just the businesses.
I mean, you mentioned DeepSeek and companies, US companies, unwilling to send their data to a Chinese server, but I think the point of DeepSeek is that it's open source. And so what are you seeing in terms of open source adoption? Everything we've been talking about right now has been frontier closed source labs, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic. What are you seeing in terms, and how can you measure the open source adoption? Is it by the inference providers? What are you seeing there?
When we talk to businesses, it's one of the things where I think it's the type of path that's not going to make the most sense for most businesses, simply because there's so much development happening so quickly at the frontier models that the idea of bringing in your own model or using an open source model and then fine tuning your own model in house, you're probably going to get left behind very quickly. And so it's not something that's not happening at all. I mean, some businesses are certainly doing it, but for the vast majority of businesses, I just don't think it's going to make sense. And for that reason, I think it's going to stay pretty low. We can observe it in some ways. And we can certainly see like the cloud compute spend that's happening on our platform, but it's not a large part of the AI spend that's happening, at least in our data set.
Very interesting. So as you were putting together,
I lost you.
Yeah, I lost him too. All right, I'm going to jump in then. I want to, let's see if we get him back. Yep, we lost Nick. Okay, he'll be back in a second. Ara, I get to ask my question. I want to just dig in a little bit more on the open source question. There is a cost element to it. Typically, open source is going to be much better, much more efficient, much cheaper. And you're still saying the innovation at the frontier is still worth the premium that you're paying the frontier labs.
Yeah, and when I talk to engineers, they say you should start assuming that the cost of AI will go down, will increase with the best model available or the most performant model available for your purpose. Doesn't mean always use Opus or the most expensive model available. If you have like a very clear, simple use case, you can use like one of the lower case models. But that's at least how I hear engineers talk about it, where most of them are indexing to just staying up to date with the latest models as they're available.
And Nick, before you froze, you're about to ask something.
Yeah, welcome home back. Internet, yeah, to close this out, two questions for you. The first is, you're really close to the data, close to the numbers. As you were compiling this report, like what surprised you most, or more surprised that the census data was so far off? So that's question number one. And then number two would be, as you look to this year, what are you anticipating? Are you anticipating these trends continuing? Or do you have other predictions about what's going to unfold this year?
Yeah, I'll start with the first. I mean, I think what surprised me, the reason why we started doing this work in the first place is because we think that there is an important question to answer both for the general public, but also for the businesses that we serve on our platform. And it's how do you buy software in this new environment, with particular software that might be particularly make or break transformative for your business. That's what AI is for a lot of people, even if they don't realize it. And there's not a lot of data available on how to buy this kind of stuff or how to approach it or whether or not you're getting a good price or which companies are even in the lead. And when I talk to Ramp, our research, Ramp AI Index is one of the main users of it is financial markets, financial analysts. And so when I talk to them and I ask them, well, what other data set are you using to actually assess the size of like OpenAI and Anthropic? They show me these sort of private market data sets that they buy from some vendors that they don't even know the source of them. And then when they ask those vendors what the source of that is, they don't really get a very clear answer. So I think the most important part of this work is how transparent it is and trying to make this data more available to more people and make it available for free. And so what's been surprising to me, even being so close to this data, is how little there is available to answer these questions anyway. In terms of where I see things going, I think adoption, we're in our own bubble. More than 50% of businesses in our platform still don't pay for some AI models and services. So I think we're going to see more adoption. Wow. I don't think things are going to peter out. And that's on our platform, one that already indexes a little bit more toward the tech forward businesses. So it's going to happen in a couple of ways. I think there's going to be more free adoption. I think Gemini adoption especially is underrated and will continue to be so. And I think there's also going to be more adoption from the sectors that were not initially targeted for the sort of product development and AI products ecosystems. There's always been a lot of adoption in tech and finance. That's because tech people made the technology in the first place and they made products that made sense for them. Finance is just an early adopter of this stuff as always. But we have restaurants on our platform. 80% of them have never used AI. And I don't think restaurants need to be using AI to like bring, food to your table. But you can imagine, some tech forward restaurants might benefit from some marketing help or planning or financial operations help from an AI product or tool, one that just hasn't been developed for them or hasn't gone to them yet. So that's where I see a lot of adoption starting to increase. And that's going to be where we start to see these productivity benefits once it extends past the sort of power users of tech and finance over into the rest of the economy.
Awesome. Ara, thank you so much for sharing the insights. And if you want to check out the index report, go to ramp.com. You can find him on X at TryRamp. You can find Ara at Ara Kazarian on X. And Ara, thank you so much. Please come back.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep. Have a good one.
All right. That's our show. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We had some
Thank
great
you, Matt.
guests on. Yeah. Thank you, Nick.
We'll resolve those internet issues at some point,
Yeah. Well, just one a show is not so bad. I'm feeling good about that, actually.
Yeah. I noticed your lights went out during the show. What happened there?
I don't actually know. Another thing to try to debug. Yeah. Lights just turned off. I just pushed a button, came back on. No idea what happened there.
All right. We both have some work.
I want to thank our guests, Austen Allred, founder Gauntlet AI, Aaron Levie, Box. Go check out Box Extract. Tudor Achim, co-founder, Harmonic. Go check that out. And Ara just on. Go check out Ramp. Thanks, Nick, again for co-hosting. Thank you all for watching. Go check us out on Twitter at Forward Future. Check out our newsletter, forwardfuture.ai, and we will see you next time.
Have a good weekend.